Hi. Be easier to kind of hear, so if you don't mind moving forward, that would be great. I know throughout the conference, everyone has had the opportunity to listen to Marla. She has a wealth of knowledge in a variety of areas. We're very fortunate to have her here at the OFA convention. And so I kind of want to just briefly introduce her to start off this session, because we're going to move through this very quickly. We have a short amount of time. We're not going to take breaks. And her and Dr. Brad LeaMaster are just going to kind of plow through it so that we can cover the material efficiently. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Marla, if you would like to welcome her, and she's going to start off the session for us.
Yeah. Thanks very much, guys. We're not going to stand on ceremony, and appreciate you accommodating this change in plans. I have my phone up here. It is on, but I have it for a special purpose. I have the alarm set, okay? So it's going to go off and make a loud noise at 11:28. Here's the game plan. Instead of a break, we're going to go straight through, and we're going to finish at 11:30 so that these guys, and give our showcase people time to get set up, and give the staff time for lunch set, okay? So that's what we're going to do, and we are very privileged to have Dr. Brad LeaMaster here with us today. He and I have had a couple of phone conversations. This was the first day to meet in person, and we're looking forward to sharing some information with you today. What I'm going to do is share with you from the perspective of having worked with the Centers for Disease Control and the National Associations of Public Health Veterinarians. I serve on a committee that meets every 2 years to update a very important document called the Compendium. And the compendium is a very long document. Darcy's going to be passing around a resource page. There's a link to it that you can get. We did not print it off. But just to say, that's kind of my credentials to be talking with you today about things like E. coli and Salmonella and Cryptosporidium. You're going to say, you know, yesterday she talked about stories, she talked about marketing, she talked about vendors. Why does she do this? And so I have had an opportunity to meet and serve on that committee, so that's kind of my background and credentials. So what I want to do today is bring you up to date, and I think we're here amongst friends, so I can say this. This is my scare the shit out of you session, okay? That's what it is. I love to talk about fair stories, and I love to bring a smile to people's face. But this is serious stuff, and I have to talk about this. It is my duty to share with you what's happening across this country, across this continent, and across now the world when it comes to the fact that people come to our fairs, they come in contact with animals, and they can get sick, okay? So just be prepared. This is not a happy, make you smile session. It's going to scare the living daylights out of you, and it is intentional, okay? So with that, here we go. Again, 75 minutes. We're really going to cover a lot of territory, but we want to leave time. Dr. LeaMaster has some very important information for you, and we want to have time for questions. So here we go. Here are the facts of the matter, and these truly are the facts. First of all, agricultural fairs, and I think all of us in the room are agricultural fairs. It is our duty to bring people in contact with animals, right? We want to share that story. We want those kids to have their first touch. Here's another fact. Disease and illness in people and in animals, goes both ways, can result from that contact. That is a fact. People are changing. That is a fact. Our immune systems are changing. Our ability to deal with disease. We are evolving. Whether you believe in evolution or not, we are evolving. Bacteria and viruses are changing. If you ever want to have some really scientific late-night reading that also is very good, I challenge you to find a book called Microsm by a guy by the name of Carl Zimmer, and it deals strictly with the evolution of E. coli. And it is an amazing read. The bacteria is changing. Okay? It's evolution. Science is changing. Our ability to track these bacteria and virus down, to be able to test and identify them and their DNA quickly is changing. And we all know it. Media is changing. Something that happens today literally can be heard around the world, not in days, not in hours, but in minutes and very closely in seconds. Because what? We've got that cell phone in our hand, and we see something happen. We've shot a picture, a video, we've posted up something, and it's news around the world. So media is changing. So this is a very much a perfect storm when it comes to this really difficult situation. So we want to spend the first part of our time on a very specific organism called E. coli 0157H7. You need to know that it's one of probably 400 to 500 different kinds of E. coli. So we can't talk about all E. coli generically, but it is the first really and still primary cause today of illness in people comes from contact with food. In Canada, they flat out call it the hamburger disease. And that's really where we first started noticing it. And so still today, the bulk of the incidents, the reported illnesses, outbreaks occur because of food. However, we have had, unfortunately, it linked in fairs. These are very real headlines. These all happen around 2005, and I'm going to share with you here in just a second where they came. But these are the headlines: State Fair linked to outbreak. And you guys know this. I don't have to say that because one of the first ones that we knew was the Lane County Fair, and it resulted in a lawsuit, which we're going to talk about. But this, and I know you don't have even time to read all of these, but if you look at just from the perspective, God, that's an awful long list. Yes, it is. These are the outbreaks that we know have been confirmed and been tested. Lane County, 2002. 2004, North Carolina State Fair. It was related to a petting zoo, and we're going to talk about that and its implications. 2005, within the space of 6 weeks, at the Florida State Fair, the Central Florida Fair, and the Florida Strawberry Festival, all linked to a certain petting zoo. Later, there was like a headline that says, oh, E. coli at a county fair in Wisconsin. We never did follow up on that. And then later, the big Fresno Fair in California. And I'm going to talk about that one because the implications are a bit different. It was quiet for a little bit. In the fall of 2007, I was sitting in my office and my Google News alerts, my computer started going ding, 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 and it was talking about suspected E. coli cases at the Clackamas County Fair. And there's something to be known from that because of the testing that was done on the grounds. 2009, there was an outbreak associated with a display, an agriculture education display put together by Colorado State University during the National Western Stock Show. Over 24 young children became ill. There were secondary cases of infection, those kids going to daycare, and then because they had here's the thing, and I don't like this for a pre-lunch type of session, but you get E. coli through what's called fecal-oral contact. And so in a daycare situation, you can imagine with kids and diarrhea, there was secondary infections, and so 20-some kids became ill. The Pacific National Exhibition in Vancouver, they had an outbreak, I believe 6 that became ill in that one, and then the Western Fair in London, Ontario. And it's interesting because back before 2000, when I was a fair manager, I think it was before the 1999, right before the 2000 fair, my health department in Missouri came to me and said, Marla, what are you going to do about hand washing at your petting zoo to prevent E. coli? And I'm going, what in the world are you talking about? And they had gotten the news off of the health department. At that time, I guess it was still internet, I'm not really sure, but maybe it was off of a fax from Western Fair in London, Ontario. So I called my friend Gary McRae, who was the manager there, and he shared with me what they learned. That was in 1999. They had another outbreak in 2009. In 2011, the North Carolina State Fair had another outbreak. This one was not in a petting zoo. This was in the barn that housed the small stock, sheep, goats, and hogs. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that one. All of these have implications. That's why we're here in the room today. And then the P&E had another outbreak, and we just found out last month that a lawsuit has been brought forth on that. And you want to know the scary part of it? The gal that I know who is manager of their agriculture program, she's been personally named in that lawsuit. That's going to scare you to death. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Not just the bare facts of the matter, which I'm going to show you next, which are going to make you sick at your stomach, but the fact that there are legal implications as well. In 2012, the Cleveland County Fair had an absolutely horrible outbreak. We're going to talk about that. And then last year, this past August, our friends at the ECA, the Royal National Show in Queensland, Australia, they had another outbreak as well. So it's gone around the world. Just in this slide alone, you're talking about fairs and ag exhibitions in the United States, Canada, and Australia. Okay, so it's not just localized. Now, this is the one. This is the one that's going to just make you stop in your tracks, and if it doesn't, I don't know what you're doing in this room. The fact that a 2-year-old boy can go to a fair and die. I sometimes can't even hardly think about this slide for the implications that it has for our business. There were over 100 and some people that became ill after attending the Cleveland County Fair in Shelby, North Carolina. I was watching the reports come in on Google, and they started coming in on Monday after the fair had ended its 10-day run on Saturday. And it grew from 5 people, 10 people, 16 people. On Friday, the fair ended on Saturday, first reports on Monday. On Friday, this was the headline, that 2-year-old Gage Lefevre had died. It was news around the world. Actually, that headline that's right up there at the top, that came from London. It was news around the world. And over 100 people became ill. Because of the geographical situation of Shelby, where it's located, it actually, health departments in North Carolina and South Carolina were responding. It had grave implications, not only for this family, but also for the fair industry. And there are many lessons that we have to learn and take away from this. I know that one of the greatest joys in my life as a fair manager was watching young children in their very first interaction with an animal. And that smile that comes to their face, that's what we're all about. And I would never in my life dream that anything I could do would put a kid in harm's way. And you wouldn't either. But this is the fact of the matter, and we have to deal with this. We have to acknowledge it, and we have to figure out, is there something within my power that I can do to minimize this happening at my fair? And let me tell you, if that weren't enough, there's still more. And I'm going to go through kind of a laundry list of other things you need to be aware of before we get to some additional implications. First of all, H3N2V, and one of the handouts that is in front of you, deals specifically with the recommendations that came out as a result of, as we heard it in 2013, the swine flu. It's called H3N2V. It's an influenza virus. And yes, someone died from it. Absolutely on the other end of the spectrum, but equally as tragic as the 2-year-old from the petting zoo in Shelby. This was a 60-plus-year-old woman in Ohio. She had underlying health conditions, and as you'll find out here later, those are the 2 ends of the spectrum that we have to deal with. They're at the greatest risk. But she died because of her contact with pigs at a county fair. That's not what we want to have happen. And the facts of the matter is that we started seeing these health advisories coming out from the CDC and various health departments. Don't you love it that there on the left-hand side it uses our words, FAIR, F-A-I-R, to get your headline, to tell you that you should avoid entering pigs and swine exhibits? Yeah, that gets your attention. How about this one? The official CDC health advisory. It happened. Key facts for people exhibiting pigs at fairs. And this one I always love. Did you know that some people should stay away from pigs and swine barns at fairs this season? It's coming out of the CDC. It was coming out of local health departments, state health departments. This was the word because it was reality. Here are the facts of the matter. H3N2V is what's called a reportable disease by any public health department because of its what's called the pandemic potential. If you think about the great influenza outbreak in the early 1900s, a pandemic is one that goes very, very fast, and the implications to make many, many people ill and kill many, many people. H3N2V is that type of a virus. Here's what happened in 2012. There were outbreaks associated at county fairs, most of them, in 10 states, 29 different fairs. There was the one death of the woman in Ohio, 306 total cases, and of all of the tracking that they did, 98% had direct contact with pigs. In 2013, now let me back up just a second. At the end of 2012, and we all go, whew, that's over. What do? Got together. Again, I sat around a table for 2 days with public health veterinarians, animal health veterinarians from Ohio, from Indiana. We had people from USDA. We had people from University of Iowa, University of Ohio. Everybody in a room saying, what can we do in 2013 to keep this from happening, again, based upon what we know? And the result of that is that 7-page document that you had, a set of measures that we all came to an agreement with that we thought might help reduce the transmission of this disease. We know that pigs can have this, okay? But what we needed to do was help particularly young hog exhibitors understand that they play a role in the distribution of this disease. How do you teach a kid not to bring a sick pig after they have been working so hard to get it ready for the fair? How do you talk with them about the fact that it's highly transmittable, that they need to be washing their hands? Lots of things. So that's the document that came out of it. Then beginning in about late May last year, I started regular calls with the CDC, and we were talking with public health veterinarians and public health officials to say, what are we going to do this season? What are we going to do monitor? Well, thank goodness for a number of factors. You know, we could pat ourselves on the back and say it was our good work with all of these measures, but I think it had more to do with the fact that across the Midwest, where the majority of hog shows take place, where the majority of outbreaks occurred in 2012, it was cool. The pigs weren't under stress, okay? And so the transmissibility of this disease went down. We only had one hospitalization. We had just 5 minor outbreaks, the last one occurring in September. And we go, whew. But we can't rest on that because, again, it's a highly evolving virus, and there's a lot of other things. And I think we're all paying attention to the news right now about the H1N1 virus, which was 4 years ago now, it was called the swine flu at the time. So we have to pay attention to these things. That's what I really want to get across. There are a lot of different things that can affect you. You can't see all the details on this particular slide, but this is, with a lovely chick in the background, a graphic representation of the rise in salmonella as reported from the CDC from 1991 to 2012. Going up. And salmonella is one of those that, quite honestly, is probably an underreported disease. You get it, you want to die, you feel like you're going to die, but about 24 hours later, you're okay. It's food poisoning. Most people don't ever report it unless it becomes very, very serious. So we consider it probably one of the most highly underreported diseases. But yet it happens, and there's a demographic. There is someone who comes to our fair that is particularly vulnerable, and that is children who like to hold baby chicks. And if we've got hatching operation at our fairs and that we are letting them have that opportunity to hold that cuddly little chick for the first time, we are probably exposing them to the potential to contact salmonella. In fact, the CDC says in the most latest compendium is don't, and that's the capital word, don't let children younger than 5 years of age, older adults, or people with weak immune systems handle or touch chicks, ducklings, or other live poultries. What implications does that have for your fair? Do you have a hatching operation? Do you work with your poultry producers? Something to think about. Did you know that this was in the CDC guidelines? Salmonella also can be transmitted by reptiles. It's been, since 1975, it's been illegal to sell or distribute turtles with less than 4 inches of a shell diameter. But guess what happened this summer in California? There was a game operator at the Mid-State Fair in San Luis Obispo who was giving away baby turtles as prizes. Now, do you want this headline at your fair? So, another little don't in the CDC guidelines right now is that game operators and carnivals should never give away reptiles or amphibians. Is it happening in your carnival? Do you know? What's in your contract with your carnival that would prohibit this, to let them know? What are the implications if your fair is in the headlines like that? And guess what? There's still more. So there's cryptosporidium, which is another enteric pathogen, another one that comes from fecal-oral contact. It gets into your guts. This recommendation was added to the most recent iteration of the compendium based upon a couple of outbreaks that occurred as a result of contact at camps, summer camps. And if you can imagine the situation in one summer camp where the most children became ill, they had baby calves, young baby calves still on the bottle. They were in huts kind of up here at this top part of the camping area. They were uphill from the camp garden, which laid down in this area, where they were teaching kids to grow food for their own consumption, lettuce, radishes, all those types of things. Heavy rains. What is presumed is that heavy rain takes the waste, the fecal waste from the young baby calves, takes it down into the garden area. The kids pick the radishes, the lettuce, they eat them, and they got sick. Okay? And so, as a result of this, again, the new CDC protocol recommends that no children should be handling baby ruminants. Everybody know what a ruminant is? We're talking calves, sheep, goat, camelids, alpacas, llamas. No kids should be having direct hand contact with them unless you've got proper hand hygiene protocol. And don't get me on my high horse, but proper hand hygiene protocol is not sanitizers. It's hand washing. and there is a huge difference, and we could talk all day on that. Here's another one, Q fever. Not a lot heard of, and it may not be applicable to you, but if your fair has a birthing center where you intentionally bring people together to watch animals giving birth, then you need to be aware of Q fever from, again, ruminants giving birth. Anybody in here actually operate a birthing center at your fair? No one? Okay, all right, we'll go past it, but just if you ever think about that, again, in the compendium, there are some specific protocols that are put forth, and really good management practices, which is a double barrier to keep people from getting close to the birthing animals, and you're going to do that from a lot of other reasons other than Q fever. Promptly cleaning up the afterbirth byproducts, cleaning up the bedding, making sure the area is well ventilated. Good management, and this will probably be minimized. So again, the facts of the matter. Let's review them because they are the facts. Agricultural fairs bring people in contact with animals. That's what we do. Disease and illness in people and in animals, it goes both ways, can come from this contact. People are changing. The disease, the bacteria, the viruses are changing. Science is changing, and the media's changing. All of those things, that's the perfect storm we live in. So what are the implications for fairs? What does this mean to you other than to scare you and perhaps paralyze you at this point? Well, we're going to go through and I'm going to look and share with you some specific examples of how other fairs have dealt with this in terms of operational changes. Because what one fair does may impact you. I've been there. Have anybody been you? A reporter shows up on your doorstep and say, hey, I understand that XYZ fair's doing this. What are you doing about it? Okay, so you need to know what those operational changes are. It could result in financial loss, and for a number of reasons, and I've got a lot of examples on that. Litigation. Again, I think a lot of us sometimes get paralyzed just by thinking about the implications of a lawsuit. Our image and our perceptions, we are all about good times, good, clean family fun, bringing people in touch with animals for the first time, kids especially. That's our image and our perception. I'm going to show you some headlines. Insurance. Now there's a kicker for us. I'll show you some specific things, and then regulations that might impact you. So let's look at some specific examples with this. As a result of the outbreak in 2004 in North Carolina, which occurred at a petting zoo, 6 months after the outbreak, the state veterinarian put forth some recommendations for the operation of petting zoos at agricultural fairs. 6 months after that, it became law. Not a recommendation. It's a state statute, and it's called Aiden's Law. And there's a link that you can read it. You can go. It dictates the size, the language on the signs, the font size on the signs, the material to be used. It has to be, the petting zoo has to be inspected prior. I won't say it's onerous, but it changes the landscape of what we're doing. One of the things that, as I think about my fair that I used to have and where we had our petting zoo, here's one of the little things that impacts from it. In the state of North Carolina, if you have a petting zoo and it is on what's called a permeable surface, something that water can run through, so we're talking grass, dirt, sawdust, that type of thing. If you have your petting zoo there, it's acceptable, but you cannot let anything else happen on that piece of ground for 6 months afterwards. My petting zoo, which was in a 100 by 60 tent, was on grass, and 5 days after the fair ended, we had an antique flea market right there. That piece of grass, if I'd had to keep it sterile for 6 months, I couldn't have done business. Here's what happened in Shelby, North Carolina. The week after the outbreak, a week and a half after the outbreak came through, about 5 days after Gage Lefevre had died, the high school, the Shelby High School in Cleveland County, their football team was getting ready to play for state playoffs. They were in a divisional final. It was going to be a home game. As sometimes high school people do, somebody decided to play a trick, and they let a bunch of goats out on the high school football field. Goats are ruminants, for those of you that don't know. And because of this in the news, the Shelby High School, they had to keep their entire football field free of no activities for 6 months. Because it is a known fact that the bacteria will survive for at least 6 months in soil. That's what happened in North Carolina at the state fair. So Aiden's Law was created, and here's the implication and the takeaway for you. If something were to happen here and your state legislators decided they needed a law, are they going to go out and reinvent the wheel, or are they going to go on a Google search and say, oh, North Carolina's already got one. Can we model after that? So you need to know about that. The big Fresno Fair in California, one of the very large fairs, and I talked with their assistant manager just to make sure that this was still in play, because this was a 2005 outbreak. As a result of their outbreak, in which the child who became most ill happened to be the daughter of the lead TV news anchor in their market. That's scary, but you know what? That little girl had major organ issues. I believe that she's partially paralyzed, partially blind. She will be on dialysis for the rest of her life. That's the reality. Big Fresno Fair said, besides the lawsuit that they had to deal with in the settlement, they decided that one of the risk management strategies that they might deploy is that they were not going to allow food of any kind in the barns. Food of any kinds. I don't know about you, but exhibitors, livestock exhibitors in Missouri kind of like to have pancake parties, pizza parties, anything else. I know what it's like to be on the business end of a lead rope, taking a heifer into the show ring. You don't have time to go down to the carnival or the other end of the grounds to eat. You need to eat on the run. There's a social aspect of it. Fresno said, no more. We're not going to do that. And they've done it successfully. I always like it. You know, if you tell somebody you can't do something, you need to have an alternative. Here's what we're going to do. And quite honestly, they did it very well. They created an area immediately outside of their barn just for exhibitors. They put in tables, they put in chairs, they put in a grill, they put in a hand washing station. They called it the feed trough, and they said, exhibitors, here's where we need your cooperation. So they came up with a satisfactory solution. But what if something happened and someone said, hey, Lonnie, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep food out of your barn? You need to know what some other fairs are doing, because it's an individual choice for you, okay? It's an individual choice, but you need to know what other fairs are doing. North Carolina State Fair. Again, 2011, here they are, hit again. This one came out of people going, like we hope people go, into the sheep, goat, and hog barn. They had 20-some people become ill. So they met together because they said, oh my God, here we go again. They are a State Department of Agriculture run agency, and so they said, we can't have this. The governor put together a commission. They said, here's what we're going to do for 2012 and beyond. We will restrict visitor access to the barn. They can do that because their barns are really flexible in the way that you can do the layout. So you can walk into the barn, you can go right to the show ring, you can sit, you can watch the show, but you can't go back into the stalling areas. If you are, you know, if you are a Hereford breeder and you want to go back and talk to the guys in the Hereford aisle, you can't do that if you're a visitor. Beyond certain gates, it's restricted only to exhibitors. They're saying you can't go there. And they did it not only for the disease implications, but for some other risk management strategies. And then I talked to their manager again, and he said, and then in 2013, we added a specific line item to our daily staff meeting that we are going to talk about our plan. Is it working? Our risk management strategies, not only as it relates to the carnival or to the gates or to anything else on the grounds, but they added a line item. What are we doing about the potential for people becoming ill or injured as it relates to our animals? So that's what they're doing, and you need to be aware of that. The Cleveland County Fair in 2013, after that horrible outbreak and the death in 2012, they said, we are not going to have a petting zoo. That's their decision. They said the risk is too great. We can't go forward with this. They also convened a blue ribbon panel that involved all of the stakeholders. It involved health department officials at the local and state level. It involved visitors, exhibitors, staff, board members, a really blue ribbon panel, and we also have a link there on that resource list where you can read their recommendations. They too restricted visitor access to their barns. They changed their traffic flow, and you can only go in to watch from the show ring. You can't go into the aisles. And so what did that do to some other fairs? These are some headlines. This is from Minnesota. Minnesota, health concerns closing fair petting zoos. There were a number of county fairs that decided they weren't going to take the risk in 2013. They closed their petting zoos. The Hancock Fair, which I believe was in the Northeast, they decided that they were going to have their fair, but there would be no animals whatsoever. I don't know how they fulfilled their agriculture commitment at that point in time, but that was their decision. They couldn't stand the risk. And I know some of you in the back can't see the picture on the right, but this was a petting zoo operator in North Carolina who responded to the fact that he could not have anybody touching his animals, but he could still sell feed. It was really a clever little thing. He's got his barrier to prevent access, and then he's got these PVC chutes that are out of about 3-inch PVC. He sells the feed, carrots, and whatever to the kids. They put it in the chute, and of course the animals they respond right there. But this man, this petting zoo operator who has a passion for making sure that kids understand about animals, I talked to him. I mean, the man was crying. He was crying because he no longer had the opportunity to run his business the way he thought it should be run, and for that opportunity for kids because of Aiden's Law and the fact that the fair management didn't want to risk it. These are the things that are happening, and you need to be aware of it. Litigation, the Lane County Fair in 2002, it came, and just before it went to trial, $32 million class action lawsuit against the Fair Board, it was withdrawn because the lawyer essentially said he wasn't going to get the home run that he wanted, and he was going to save it. He's been involved in every case since around the country. Someone on his staff is consulting. The Florida Strawberry Festival settled theirs for an unknown amount, but I look at the manager when he talks about it, and I know it was huge. The Florida State Fair, we think might have been settled. We're actually not sure. And the Central Florida Fair, when I came on staff, I was talking to these folks as late as 2009, and this case was still getting ready for some depositions. I'm not sure if it's been settled. We haven't heard anything the last couple of years. The Big Fresno Fair settled their case. The case was eventually brought against not only the fair, but also the petting zoo and the third-party contractor that provided the hand-washing stations. The North Carolina State Fair is interesting on several things. Again, think about this and think about what it means to you if your fair was involved. The 2004 outbreak was heard because of the way that the State Fair is an agency. It was heard by an industrial commission judge, not a jury, a single person. It was heard in the summer of 2011, 7 years after it had occurred. Testimony was made, depositions taken. Actually, our CEO, Jim Tucker, testified. Dr. Stephen Neal, who helped us develop our consumer protection program, he testified. Imagine testifying, given deposition 7 years after the fact. And on December 1st of 2011, this single judge made his decision, and he said, based upon what was known at the time in 2004, what was known then, and what was available to the fair management and the state, we are ruling in favor of the state. Good, win for us, right? But, he goes on, and he had several buts in there. Based upon what we know today, I wouldn't have been able to uphold this. Well, the plaintiffs turned right around and they went to the next level, which was a 3-panel commission, and as for the next level of appeal, and that group heard, and then they released their findings in 2012 late, and on a vote of 2-1, that's a majority, that's a win, but 2-1, they upheld the lower judge's decision. Again, they said based upon what we knew, but the dissenting judge said, I don't care what was known and wasn't known, this was wrong and shouldn't happen, and she was pretty vociferous about it. So the next level in North Carolina, Supreme Court, and oral arguments were heard in November of 2013, 9 years after the fact. So we don't know what's going to happen. What we thought was perhaps a win continues to go on. Then after the 2011 outbreak, at the time on the day that the statute of limitations was going to go out on filing it, one of the people who became ill, their family, filed a lawsuit against North Carolina State Fair, but it was dismissed voluntarily. That doesn't mean it can't come back, but it was dismissed in this late fall. And then the Cleveland County Fair, as you can well imagine, it wasn't Gage Lefevre's parents who filed the first lawsuits. It was families of some of the other 106 people who became ill. But the filing started in 1 month after the outbreak. And Gage Lefevre's parents have filed suit against the fair and the petting zoo this past year. What about images and perceptions? These are some real headlines. This came out, of course, in North Carolina right after the Cleveland County outbreak. It says, petting zoos, closing time. This one came out in Australia, from the Sky News in Australia, and it says, animals blame for E. coli threat at ECA. And I picked that up on my news alert. Look at the timeline. Gage Lefevre died in October 2012. We didn't have very many fairs, obviously, taking place in November, December, January, February, but the big fair, kind of the granddaddy, Houston Livestock Show, known all the way around the world. They opened up in early March last year, and this was the headline that I picked up, not only in the Houston news, but also from a newspaper in China, an English newspaper in China. This was the headline: families urged to be cautious at animal exhibits. Yeah, and then if you read the fine print, you say, okay, pediatrician says washing hands can help prevent Salmonella and E. coli, but what captures our mind first is that headline, and that's the one that gets carried on CNN, on headline news, and it's picked up and heard around the world. And then my favorite, actually, it's the one that makes me ill. After the Cleveland County outbreak, the LA Times, the other side of the country, said, ban petting zoos, the E. coli outbreak raises questions. LA Times picked up around the world. What about insurance? Well, the fact of the matter is that this past year in 2013, the Northern Wisconsin State Fair, they were getting ready to actually have a petting zoo at a non-fair event. But in due practice, they said, hey, everybody participating, we need to look at the insurance. The manager there, relatively new manager, but he knew to look beyond page 1 and page 2. He read all 20-some pages, and you know what he found? He found that their insurance excluded any coverage for anything related from E. coli, specifically named. He called us. He asked Jim Tucker, our CEO, who's actually a lawyer. He sent the policy to us. We said, yeah, you're right. If someone became ill, this would not be covered. He had to figure out what to do. Stop the petting zoo, get a different insurance policy. This was an implication. So the challenge to you is, do you know what's in your insurance policies? Have you read all the way past, or are you just taking that top certificate and not reading all of the exclusions? North Carolina State Fair in 2013 decided not to have a petting zoo, and it had everything to do with insurance, because their petting zoo operator could not secure the policy necessary for good business practices. They required $1 million. They do that on everything. And this operator could not secure that policy at a cost that he or she believed was fair. And the fair said, sorry, we can't do business with you unless you have this policy. So they went without a petting zoo. What are the regulations? What has happened? Of course, we talked about the Aiden's Law, and we went through that, the state statute. You can read it for yourself. But did you know that all fairs in Washington, the state of Washington, that the state public health department put forth rules that govern petting zoo animal exhibits at fairs? I didn't. I'm not sure all of the fairs in Washington knew that until we started talking about it last fall. And it was passed as rulemaking from the public health department. Now, from a lawyer's perspective, if you read it, it's not all that bad, but I think the challenge is, did the fairs really know what was going on? Do you know what's happening here? Do you have someone who's advocating on your behalf in legislators and with rulemaking bodies? That's the issue. And across the country and across the Canada as well, there may be local regulations from your health department, because local county health departments work almost autonomously from anything else to create what is the best for their county. Couple of things I want to leave you with, and then we want to leave plenty of time for Dr. LeaMaster to come and share with some things specifically for you for Oregon. Scared you to death. I could feel the air being sucked right out of the room. That was the intent. But now let's go forward. What do? We overcome challenges. We deal with things head on. First of all, think about the risk, okay? And we have to segregate to this. Where are the areas of greatest risk? And that comes down to the animal interaction with high risk individuals. And those are, get this in your head, children, kids younger than 5. And I hate to say it because I've got my AARP card and I'm getting closer to this date, but the 65 years and older, here's the fact of the matter, guys, your immunity is on the downhill slide, okay? We get sick easier. So we are at risk. If you have pre-existing conditions, asthma, diabetes, lung, heart diseases, anything like that, long-term health conditions, that individual at your fair is at risk. Do you do a special day for seniors and open them up your petting zoo or encourage them to go to the animal barns? Do you do a special day for at-risk populations that may be in wheelchairs and they've got some underlying health issues? What are you doing with them? Is there something different that you can do in your risk strategy? And pregnant women, because when a woman is pregnant, all of her health resources are going for the health of that baby. She's at risk. So think about your population, who's coming to your fair, the potential for contact, and what you can do. I do one little plug only because it's out there. It's an industry standard if there were one. The IAFE offers a training program. It's a 6.5-hour workshop called the Consumer Protection Program. Actually, I believe, Leah, you may recall this, or Don Hillman, it was offered here in Oregon, wasn't it, through the WFA in 2005? Yep. And so 2005 is a long time ago. It was a 2-day program at that juncture. Now we've got it down to 6.5 hours. I'm a co-presenter on that with Dr. Stephen Neal, who actually is headquartered just down the road at Eugene. And we travel around the world doing these presentations. And so what we do in those is, first of all, trying to get somebody to commit 6.5 hours out of their day to come talk about this awful subject is always tough, especially if you're a volunteer. And then what we've had happen is someone will attend our workshop and they'll go back home and they'll be, whoa, we got to do this. And whether that's a staff member trying to go back home to the board or a board member trying to go back home to the staff or fellow board members, sometimes there's just not the buy-in. I've actually had a board member at a small county in the fair in the Midwest come up to me red-faced and angry and say, "What are you doing? You're an animal rights activist." No, I'm not. I'm just trying to let you know what the risks are. And so we have a hard time sometimes with buy-in. But let me share with you. When the H3N2V outbreaks occurred in 2012, what we found is the fairs who had been through our training program were better prepared to deal with it because they already had a risk management plan. Most of them already knew exactly where their hand washing was. They had signs. They knew how to deal with the media. So that's my brief plug for our workshop. It's a resource that's available to you, but there still are challenges getting people to go on. So what can you do? If a CPP workshop is offered anywhere near you, we would encourage you to attend it so that you can understand. And if you do send someone, make sure you debrief immediately so that you can review what is learned, you can go through your risk management strategies, and then you can act. Because just because you go to some training and you've got this great notebook, if you just go home and put it on a shelf doesn't mean anything, and it has to be reviewed continually. I know you guys are good risk managers. You do that in order to survive. This is just one more element of your risk management plan. And then the critical material. I'm going to tell you, if something happens in this state, right now, to my knowledge, the only thing you'll be judged against is the compendium. And every lawyer that deals with it knows it. So go to that link, make sure you download it, make sure you read it. Same thing for the influenza. And then pay attention to the news and educational opportunities so that you're aware. Okay. Dr. LeaMaster, have I left you enough time? Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to take this question screen off and we're going to go to Dr. LeaMaster's presentation. And we are going to, do you want my clicker? You want to roam? How do you want to do this? Okay, Dr. LeaMaster is your state animal health veterinarian. Welcome, Dr. Brad LeaMaster.
Yeah, thank you. So it's okay, got it.
Got it? Okay, I'll take my phone.
Okay, Marla. Well, thank you very much. Boy, wasn't that great? We are so fortunate to have Marla here. Let's give her a big hand. Well, when I learned she was coming, I was very excited because she can give the high-level perspective that I can't, or anyone here in Oregon. She sees the national and international view of this subject. So I think she framed the topic very well. What you'll see from me is going to be a little bit of a repeat. But I want to begin to focus some of those points that Marla pointed out, and so how can we apply those here for us in Oregon? And I'm going to concentrate on veterinary inspections. So we have animals coming into the fair. How can we do that risk management that Marla was talking about? How can we provide the fair goers, the people coming to our fairs, how can we provide the assurance that happy, healthy animals are at the fair? So let's do that. Usually I like to prance around. Will this work from a distance? Goes back to my old teaching days where I used to prance around the classroom so the students wouldn't fall asleep. So if I come up real close, look at that, technology. So let me do that. We can go through these. I have about 10 or 11 slides, and then really what we want to do is engage you guys for 5 or 10 minutes so we can discuss before the lunch arrives. So as Marla said, county fairs bring together animals from many different areas, and people from all over come to a common space. And so we know this, and so the chance of transmission of pathogens, there's an increased risk, and it's both transferring Pathogens, the possible transfer of pathogens from animal to animal. But as Marla showed very clearly, some of those can infect people. We call those zoonotic disease. And like I just said, people coming to the fair, they're coming there, it's fun. People love fairs. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I go to as many of them as I can. I'm a child of the 50s and 60s. I grew up in rural on a ranch in eastern Oregon, and animals, agriculture is part of my upbringing, and it's very fun. And it's just human nature. People love to come to fairs. And one of the big attractions are, whoops, see, I pushed the wrong one. Hit the green arrow. No. Ta-da. Okay. So, people like fairs. It's a chance for all of us. We're all involved in agriculture to show agriculture. It's part of the economic engine that runs this country. It's where our food comes from. It's a great opportunity to teach, and we know that. So, but the public, the last 2 or 3 generations, there's been a huge shift from that rural upbringing from all of us that just take that for common knowledge. Folks growing up in the city, they don't have this knowledge or exposure that we have, but they're attracted to it. They want to know about it, and so they come to the fairs, and their expectation is that all animals are going to be healthy, and that's what we have to provide, is that assurance. So Marla touched on this. State requirements differ from state to state, and here in Oregon we don't have a rule or a statute that requires veterinary inspections at fairs. It's the local responsibility to provide that. My office can help you devise guidelines, but it's the local fair's responsibility to get that veterinarian and work and find somebody locally that will help you do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So why are veterinary inspections important? Well, the vet checks, again, they provide the assurance that healthy animals are coming in. And so decreasing the risk of animal-to-animal transmission, and also if there are diseased animals, a stressful time. People may not, or the 4-H person raising, whoever's bringing the animals, they may be healthy the day before, but the stress of loading, by the time they get to the fair, maybe they've been in a travel trailer for several hours, but they could break. If they were incubating, say, a respiratory pathogen, they could start coming down with any number of things. A pre-vet check will spot those early signs of infection and disease problems, and you can filter them out and keep them out of the fair. For me, my perspective on it, again, like I said, in Oregon, it's the fair's responsibility to provide the vet checks, and we'll work with you on that. And for me, I expect if there's a disease problem, I want to be talking to a veterinarian. What I don't want is to get a call and there's anxious people on the other line, and they're saying, "Oh man, tonight is the sale of our market hogs, and a couple of hours ago some hogs began to break with diarrhea or respiratory disease. What should we do?" Well, my response is going to be very conservative. Something I can defend is going to be, well, do we call off the sale? Some of you may have been in that sector. Huge politics, right? And so the pressure is there. Okay, we'll call the state vet. He'll fix it. No, I'm going to say, oh boy, we got to do the most conservative thing there. And if they're sick animals, guess what? I'm going to want to get them out of there, get them into a quarantine. If it takes calling off the sale of the animals, then that's where I'm going to go. It has to be that way. Very conservative. So we don't want to go there. We want to have a veterinarian involved. There's surveillance going on. Any animals that start showing signs of sickness, we'll have a plan to get them out of the group and keep the fair going. So that's it. And like Marla said, planning ahead of time is so important. Have a plan, so when things do happen, there's not this mad rush of, oh my, what do we do? What do we do? Well, if there's a plan that's been discussed, we know what to do. We know who to call. Those places, a quarantine place. Sick animals go here. People know it. It can happen very quickly. So have a plan ahead of time. Have a place identified ahead of time. And each fair is different. You know, we just can't proclaim a spot. Some are big, some are small. Some places just don't have it. Maybe you have to lease or rent or have some bring in a few livestock panels to make a temporary place, but we can work that out ahead of time. So have a plan, have a vet. And remember, so those of you who attended the spring conference, remember Sarah, she was the senior vet student who did a study of vet checks in Oregon. It was very good. That excellent information. I still use it. But I wanted to show this. There's things out there that come into the fairs. And so remember this slide that Sarah put up of all the Oregon counties that responded. 63% of those counties acknowledged that, yeah, some of those animals had lice, and I'm assuming it's cattle and probably swine. About half had, maybe a runny nose or a cough. And then we're picking up some ringworm, the fungus infection, sore mouth on some sheep, foot rot probably on some sheep. So there they are. It's coming in, and they're not being noticed ahead of time. But a vet check with expert eyes, we can spot some of these. And are these preventable? Yeah, most of them are. Foot rot, sore mouth, ringworm, maybe the respiratory. It's hard to say. Lice for sure. First of all, it's knowing where to look and knowing what they look like. You can look right at these things, and if you're not trained, you won't pick them out. But lice are they're very contagious. They can jump from one host to another in just one little touch. So these can be part of a teaching, education, and outreach program. This is a great platform to teach kids. And there they are. They just love this, learning something new, and they feel good about it because they're keeping their animal healthy. So the purpose of this slide to show you, yes, they're out there. Vet checks are important. We can screen some of these things, and it provides for this wonderful education outreach opportunity. Okay, so some recommendations, and again, this just underscores what Marla was saying. We work with our 4-H leaders and our superintendents ahead of time and get that plan in place. What are we going to do? Contingency planning, risk management mitigations. Provide the exhibitors with information. We have a lot of that. What to expect. Again, what to do if we do see some problems. And if all possible, the vet checks should be performed before the animal entry into the fairgrounds. And I know some, again, it's based on the fairgrounds and the layout and things. Sometimes they just have to come into the area, but as best we can, get that vet check before we begin mixing animals. Again, all species, all classes, not just the livestock, but the pocket pets should be looked at, the rabbits, the chickens, everything that comes into the show. The expectation is that they're healthy. People should know ahead of time, and it's very sad. It's heartbreaking for a 4-H kid who's spent all the time waiting for that great day where he can show off the animal, and the animal becomes sick, and you have to tell them, well, they can't participate. But having that as part of the education and outreach, they know it ahead of time that, okay, if your animal has to be removed, this is why, and it's for the good of the show. And again, biosecurity, very, very important, is part of that evolving standards that we just can't dismiss anymore. We have to have it. Okay, I'm going to summarize here, and then Marla and I will be in the room, and especially Marla, take advantage of her here. She's just a wealth of knowledge. I love talking to her. But two things, again, have a vet and have a plan. And that veterinarian provides that assurance of healthy animals. It provides that public assurance of accountability, and if there is a disease problem, you have that expert right there to help mitigate it. Also, as Marla was saying, having a veterinarian there would help any liabilities, some complaints or anything like that. Just having that veterinary oversight shows that the fair has done its due diligence, has done everything it can do to provide those healthy animals, and you can defend that. So again, have your vet, have a plan. A plan is very, very important, so you know ahead of time what to do, and all the participants should be aware of the plan in response. So that's what I wanted to leave you with. Have about 10 minutes. Let's take advantage of it here, especially Marla, you guys, some of that very important information from the national level, the compendium, those things that can be incorporated here in Oregon. So there's a question right there. Go ahead. I'm going to give the mic to you so everybody in the room can hear.
We have a pre-weigh-in before our fair for all the animals, and we basically have market animals. With the problems with swine in Midwest, should we have a vet there on that day, or is it something that symptoms can be told right away?
So on your pre-weigh, that's when they're coming in, and are they and they're coming into the fairgrounds right there. Oh, before the fair. So, 90 days before. You know, okay, so it wouldn't hurt to have someone there to spot anything, but really you want that vet check as they come into the fair. Okay, okay. Not really. I mean, if you're looking at respiratory disease and some of those diarrhea things, I mean, they're going to come on pretty soon.
One of the things you do have with the pre-weigh-in is an opportunity to communicate with your exhibitors what your plan is. And that is an opportunity. National Pork Board has a wonderful resource, a pamphlet for kids particularly. It talks about biosecurity on the farm, talks about opportunities. And the challenge I think we have, as we've both emphasized, telling a kid that after they've worked so hard they can't bring that pig, that it's heartbreaking. And a lot of them, even if the kid is sick, they're going to keep on coming because they've worked too hard. So your pre-weigh-in, think about it from a risk management standpoint. It's also a communication standpoint. It's a time to make sure you have names, addresses, and emails and cell phone numbers so you can let them know if something happens. And also you can emphasize to them, please be aware, if your pig gets sick, people could get sick, people could die, other pigs could get sick. So kind of in that. Other questions? We've scared you into silence. There's one at the back. Shout. Oh, Brad.
I'll take the mic back here. Okay. Good one. Let's talk about influenza.
Yeah, and that's one of the situations, at least from the studies that were shared with me when we were working on swine influenza, and that's where it particularly gets with the kids. You know, the kids would get it from whatever source, they would pass it to the pigs and pass it to others. So that one is just highly contagious both way on the zoonotic. It'll go both ways, and if you think about it, you know, when CDC tells us during flu season, what are we supposed to do? Cover your nose, cover your mouth, and hand washing. Those are things. So if a kid has a fever, if they're sneezing, all of those respiratory aspects, they can pass that right on back to the pigs. So now E. coli is a whole different situation. We're talking in the enteric pathogens and with the bacteria, but specifically with H3N2V, it can go the other way. And H1N1, I'm assuming, right? Probably so.
So Marla, with that, has any of the other states around the country or the other fairs, have they posted signs to mitigate that? Say, if you warning people, if you're sick and sneezy, please don't come into the swine barn.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, even besides just the H3N2V, a lot of times I have seen, particularly your large livestock producing fairs in the Midwest, they will say, if you're sick, please don't come into the barn for the health of our animals. If you are sick, do not come into our barns. And it's a good way to emphasize to the public that farmers care about their animals, that they are in it to make sure that there is a safe product. So you're actually doing a service at that point in time to communicate the importance of healthy animals in production. Other questions? Oh, well, thank you, Darcy. She's going to run around for us.
Are there any combinations of small animals or large animals in a close area? Because we have very restricted areas that we should avoid, where chickens give rabbits and rabbits get chickens, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no. One thing we should be very cognizant of is the example from the Puyallup Fair a few years ago, the sheep and the cattle proximity. And it's here in the Northwest, I don't know about the rest of the country, but we have something called malignant catarrhal fever that can go from sheep to cattle. And so they've changed in Washington. They keep that separation from sheep and cattle. Now, as far as the little pocket pets, the only thing I can think of are, some of the lice and ectoparasites. I'm not aware of any pathogens that would jump from, say, a rabbit to a chicken, that sort of thing. But certainly the cattle and the sheep would be one that you would want to create that distance. Good question.
Thank you. What about vaccinating prior to coming to fair for influenza on the hogs and?
Yeah, no, I would just recommend that's the important that veterinarian in the loop. They're going to be the local folks. They're going to know, but some of them are depending on the species of animal. That vaccination protocol is part of what they're learning to do in the production cycle. So most of them will. Yeah. Yep.
I might add, there actually was some disagreement amongst our committee when we were talking about H3N1, specifically H3N2V, because a vaccine specifically for that strain has not yet been developed. And so the issue a year ago when we were discussing was that, yes, there are influenza vaccine for hogs, but is it the right one? And there was a let's just say a diverse opinion amongst the veterinary staff in the room that said, yes, go ahead because it will have some measure of protection. And there was another one that said it's not specific, so there's no need to bother. So there's not 100% agreement, but working with your local vet who understands what's happening in your particular community, I think is the best thing that you can possibly do, and their recommendations on that.
Oh, go ahead.
What about spraying facilities, disinfecting ahead of fairs? How long before it should you do it? What should you be using, to stop anything that might be there or prevent that kind of thing? Would it help?
There's a whole host of different products. We recommend Vircon because it's biologically active, broad spectrum, and environmentally safe. But the best thing you could do is just a good steam cleaning. Get everything clean, get the manure off, if your facilities allow it. And sunshine, if you can get it cleaned up, a week or two ahead of time, just that drying and sunshine is very beneficial. The numbers of bacteria and things in the environment just drop off hugely. So I guess to answer my question, the more window of time you can allow between the time you clean up and bringing in animals, the better off you're going to be. So there was another, did I see another hand? Oh, there's one.
Open barns versus closed-in barns, does that make a difference? Your ventilation?
Ventilation is usually good. You want the fresh air in there. It's healthy for the animals. Are you meaning controlling of pathogens and that sort of thing? So you want your animals healthy. You want that ventilation, the coolness if it's hogs. And so if you have that vet check ahead of time and you have healthy animals in there, then the chance of any pathogens leaving is small. But unless you have a place you can close the doors and you can have lots of fans and everything, as much ventilation as you can, but then have the biosecurity measures in place for the visitors coming and going that would mitigate that risk. Okay? Yeah.
I might make a comment. Some people in some circles call me the E. coli queen because that's what I seem to concentrate on. It's very important also to understand when it comes to the ventilation what you're dealing with, because E. coli is entirely different than H3N2V. H3N2V obviously is an airborne pathogen. E. coli 0157H7 is not. You get it by putting something in your mouth. It's fecal oral. So if part of your risk mitigation strategy is what risk am I dealing with? What am I wanting to do right here? So you've got to say, yeah, ventilation is great if we're talking about animal health, if we're talking about H3N2V specifically. If you have concerns about E. coli 157H7, you got to be thinking bigger than that. Yeah. Okay, great. Good. Something in the back?
Yeah, we're from Clackamas County. And so, as you know, we've dealt with it. Is there a test lab that you can take a pre-sample and send into them with a random testing of your facilities? Because where we found the E. coli was completely away from the barn, completely after the fair, and it surfaced in an area that we were stunned by.
I'll let Dr. LeaMaster get to some specifics here in Oregon, but here's what I remember from when Raven was the manager at the time, and I was talking with her. 100 samples, 33% which came back positive and found in all other places, which goes to, you know, you could have it on your shoes and carry it somewhere else. I didn't say in the Cleveland County case where they found E. coli on the grounds. One was in the bedding area adjacent to the petting zoo. The other was downhill in a grass parking lot. But there had been torrential rain. So from the testing, the thing that you need to understand about testing is you've got to be very, very specific in what you're testing for. There's a basic test that can just give you the count, but it's just going to tell you that you've got all sorts of things. Again, you're going to have to be very, very specific with the E. coli because you've got to get down to E. coli 0157H7. As far as the resources on testing, I don't know what. Okay, Dr. LeaMaster.
Yeah, no, we can test for them here in the state. Public Health Lab will run them, and I think the vet school at Oregon State can do it. So we have it. Timing, yes, but just remember those E. coli's, their fecal origin has to be a critter somewhere, and so then to trace it back, these unexpected places, you say, oh, how did it get here? And so was it poor biosecurity on someone's boots? I think Lane County, I remember they went in the barn and they were, you know, they were sampling all of the ventilation. It got airborne in the dust and got places you wouldn't expect. It's a swab. They yeah.
Think about the targets that you want to test. Because they took a sample down there. They knew that they had torrential rains. And so they went and they looked, and again, in the process of a public health investigation, they're going to ask you, where did you go? Where did you park? What did you eat? What did you eat first and foremost? And they begin to narrow it down, and that also helps in the public health testing protocol with regard to that. So they began to find a cluster that all of these people parked in this one area, and so they went and took it, and it was there in the grass. And they knew they had torrential rains 8 out of 10 days, and you know where the water goes, and so... yeah, and then they take the swab and then they culture it out with regard to that. So, and here's another important thing. Remember, animals carry it, but we're animals. We're animals. We can carry E. coli 0157H7 and not be ill from it if we have had exposure to us. And if you're a farm kid, you probably were exposed to it sometime as a kid. We probably all had it. And we have built up an immunity, but an animal does not have an immune response to it. It's a natural thing in them. So that's also important to know. And if you ever have an outbreak, they're probably going to test food and water sources first. But think about what happens 7 days after your fair. Your food vendors are all gone. So all of those things. We had another question there.
So what's the efficacy of those recycled hand wash stations? Should we be relying on those? You know, the gray, you push the button,
the self-contained.
Yeah.
The self-contained. Any hand washing is good. Think about the issues that result from a self-contained is if you don't have it plumbed up to live water and a live sewer, you've got to be very diligent with your provider to make sure it's cleaned and emptied all the time. I was at a fair that had those, and they had another issue because the gray water was running out the bottom and going across toward a food stand. One of the issues in Cleveland County was that the self-contained hand washing stand did not have soap in it, and the paper towels were gone. And they're going to use that. They're going to use that in their case. Yes. My phone. Oh, Lonnie's telling me. It says 11:25, so we got 5 minutes to answer your questions. Thanks, Lonnie. Oh my God, I only have 3 minutes. Okay, I'm going to tell you what the CDC says. CDC says that hand washing is the #1 most effective control against disease. proper hand washing. Hand washing is the act of putting your hands under running water with friction. Soap, ideally, okay? And it doesn't necessarily have to be hot water, although your local health department may have requirements for hot water, particularly as it relates to food. We hope they do. But CDC recommendations is running water, soap. Keep in mind what hand sanitizer is. I just want you to stop and think. When you've put hand sanitizer on your hands, what do? Well, you are killing good bacteria, and there's certainly some scientific evidence, but I think some of you in the room will remember this. A little dab will do you, okay? And we're fast. It's like, I'm going to knock it off. What does it say? It's 99.9% effective. What does that mean? 1% are going to do what? They're going to live. And what happens? That does not which kill you will make you stronger. They're evolving and they come back stronger than ever. So hand sanitizers in a pinch, but the biggest disservice you can do to your guests is put a big sign over it that says wash your hands here, because you are not washing your hands. You're washing your hands with soap and water. You have other things, Dad?
So I went through the consumer protection in 2005, and I remember Dr. Stephen Neal, he specifically said hand sanitizer will get you to the next hand washing station where you can wash your hands properly with soap and water. It's only a bridge to get you to the hand washing station.
That's exactly right. Obviously, you can tell that we could go on and on and on for a lot, but a couple of things happen here. Number one, I want to tell you we appreciate your change of schedule to get this in a more compact issue and in a larger forum so that more people could participate. But we do have a lunch to get ready. We have showcase folks who we need to owe them the time to get set up properly. So we're going to be ending here. Are you going to be around for a little bit? Dr. LeaMaster will be here. I'll be with you the rest of the day. I'm sure we'll both be happy to talk with you. You both know how to contact both of us. So I want to say thank you, and the final notes go to Dr. LeaMaster, though.
Thanks, anybody. Feel free to contact our office anytime as you get into the planning phase. We'll be glad to help you. And thank you very much.
Here, Leah wants to say a word.
Great, thank you everybody. Once again, if you have any questions, Marla's going to be around until tomorrow. We all know how to get a hold of Dr. LeaMaster, and if you have any questions, you can also get a hold of Kelly at the OFA office, and I'm sure they can put you in contact with the right people to get your questions answered. Thank you.